Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. If you grab a map of the world and zoom in on the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula, you're going to see two nations that honestly look like identical twins, Oman and Yemen. Geographically speaking, they're practically mirror images. They share the same basic shape, a very similar size, and nearly identical natural resources and oil reserves. But as we're going to explore today, despite starting out with the exact same deck of cards, these two neighbors are living in entirely different worlds. To really understand this, we need to look at the staggering divide in their everyday quality of life. Oman boasts one of the most developed economies in the entire Middle East. They score a highly developed 0.82 on the Human Development Index, which is basically how we measure health, education, and standard of living. Yemen? Well, Yemen scores just 0.42. To put that into perspective, they have the ninth lowest GDP in the world. Tragically, 82% of Yemen's population is currently trapped in severe poverty, lacking basic access to food, education, and healthcare. So you have to ask yourself, how on earth could two neighbors be so drastically different? Well, it absolutely isn't a lack of geographic luck. Both of these nations sit right next to the world's most critical maritime choke points. Oman is perched perfectly on the edge of the Strait of Hormuz, meaning it controls the massive flow of oil and gas leaving the Persian Gulf. Yemen sits right next to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and what's truly mind-blowing here is that a staggering 80% of all trade between Asia and Europe passes right by Yemen, simply because it's the shortest route connecting the two continents. So they both started out with the ultimate geographic jackpot.
Part 1. Diverging Historical Paths.
To figure out how these geographic twins ended up on completely different planets, we've got to rewind the clock. Let's look at Oman first. Back in 1507, the Portuguese colonized Oman. But, that control only lasted about a century. By 1650, the local Omani people banded together, fought back, and actually kicked the colonizers out completely. They then took all that maritime experience and built a massive trade empire of their own, stretching all the way from Iran to Zanzibar in Africa. Fast forward to 1872, they signed a protectorate agreement with the British to lock down their trade routes, and that partnership lasted all the way until 1951. Now, contrast that with Yemen's story. In 1519, the Ottoman Empire captured northern Yemen, and they held onto it for 400 long years, right up until the end of World War I. On top of that, Yemen's geography features these massive, rugged mountain ranges. This physically isolated the conservative Zaidi Shia population in the interior from the rest of the world. So while Oman was out building global trade networks and having open-minded cultural exchanges, Yemen was largely cut off. And that historical isolation really set the stage for some intense, deep-rooted internal divisions.
Part 2. Oman's Visionary Transformation.
So for Oman, the real game changer happened in 1970. Before this point, Oman's sultan was, well, hyper-conservative. And I mean extreme. He actively banned technological progress, he banned wearing sunglasses, and incredibly, he even banned people from talking in public for more than 15 minutes. No joke. The British, who were terrified that this kind of instability was going to threaten the vital oil trade, encouraged the Sultan's son, Qaboos bin Said, to step up. In July 1970, Sultan Qaboos overthrew his father in a completely bloodless coup. And honestly, it was the single best thing that could have happened to the country. The numbers from this turnaround are just astonishing. Think about this. When Sultan Qaboos took power in 1970, the entire country of Oman had exactly 3 schools. 3! They had 19 hospitals and a grand total of 10 kilometers of paved roads. But he immediately started pouring the nation's oil wealth straight back into his people. Fast forward just 15 years to 1985, and suddenly Oman has 500 schools, over 100 hospitals, and 3,000 kilometers of roads. He literally redrew the map of what his country was capable of. But here's the thing, he didn't just pour concrete, he completely revolutionized the society. Sultan Qaboos abolished slavery. He granted women the right to vote in municipal councils. And in a brilliant strategic move, he required foreign oil companies to actively hire and train local Omanis, which eventually ended their reliance on foreign labor. Plus, he mandated absolute religious freedom. Whether you were Ibadi, Sunni, or Shia, you were welcome and you had total freedom in Oman. And that culture of tolerance translated directly into a masterclass in global geopolitics. Oman essentially became known as the Switzerland of the Middle East. They maintained this incredibly strict neutrality in all regional conflicts, and because they weren't taking sides, they were able to act as a crucial peacemaker. We're talking about hosting peace talks between Saudi Arabia and Iran, trying to broker peace between Israel and Iran, and famously acting as the key mediator for the 2015 nuclear deal between the US and Iran. Part 3. Yemen's Decades of Division. Now we need to shift our focus back across the border. Because while Oman was busy uniting and building, modern Yemen's story became a tragedy of proxy wars. In 1962, Sunni military commanders in North Yemen staged a coup to overthrow the Zaydi Shia monarchy, and that sparked an 8-year civil war. Egypt jumped in to back the Arab nationalist rebels, but ironically enough, Saudi Arabia, which is a fiercely Sunni nation, actually backed the Zaydi Shiites. Why? Because the Saudis were terrified that if a monarchy could be successfully overthrown right next door in Yemen, that revolution might spread to their own kingdom. Up to 200,000 people lost their lives in this massive geopolitical chess match. And sadly, the divisions just kept growing. By 1970, Yemen was officially split down the middle into 2 separate countries. You had the north, controlled by Arab nationalists who were being backed by the United States. Meanwhile, South Yemen had pushed out the British and formed a communist government, literally the only one in the Middle East, and they were immediately backed by the Soviet Union. So Yemen wasn't just fighting itself anymore. It had become a literal battleground for global superpowers. Eventually, the Cold War wrapped up, and in 1990, North and South Yemen finally united into the Republic of Yemen. But, as you might guess, the peace just didn't last. The Arab Spring protests in 2011 ended up ousting the government, which created this massive, dangerous power vacuum. By 2014, the Houthi movement, which is rooted in that Zaydi Shia population from the northern mountains we talked about earlier, swept in and captured the capital city of Sana'a, and that was the spark that ignited the catastrophic civil war that is still raging today. If we look at Yemen today, it is tragically being torn apart by multiple different factions. You've got the Houthis holding the major cities, backed by Iran. Down in the center and the south, al-Qaeda actually controls territory. Then there are the Sunni factions, being backed by Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Oh, and you also have the Southern Transitional Council, whose main goal is to just split South Yemen away completely. It's a devastating proxy battleground for American, Russian, Iranian, and Saudi interests, and it's the everyday Yemeni people who are caught right in the crossfire. Part 4. The ultimate cost of leadership. So we have to ask the big question: how did 2 nations with the exact same starting advantages end up on completely opposite ends of the spectrum? Well, it really all comes down to leadership. The juxtaposition here is honestly jarring. We just saw how Sultan Qaboos of Oman literally poured every drop of his nation's oil wealth into building hospitals, schools, and a future for his citizens. Now, meet Ali Abdullah Saleh. He was the president of Yemen from its unification in 1990 until he was ousted in 2012. And unlike Qaboos, he proved to be immensely corrupt, treating his nation's wealth like his own personal bank account. According to a 2012 UN report, it's estimated that Saleh stole up to $2 billion every single year for his entire 22-year rule. He was actively siphoning this money directly out of Yemen's oil subsidy programs, hiding it away in Western assets to enrich his own family, all while the people in his country were literally starving. But it wasn't just massive theft. It was also sheer diplomatic incompetence. For instance, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, Saleh decided to politically support Saddam. Talk about a massive blunder. Saudi Arabia was absolutely furious. And in retaliation, the Saudis immediately cut off billions of dollars in aid to Yemen, and they deported 800,000 Yemeni guest workers right back across the border. The economic shock of that single decision was absolutely devastating for Yemen. And as if ruining the economy wasn't enough, Saleh actively compromised the nation's security too. Back in 1994, when people in South Yemen were rebelling against his rule, Saleh deliberately allowed al-Qaeda to operate within Yemen. He basically used them as muscle to crush the Southern Rebellion. It was quite literally a deal with the devil, and it planted a ticking time bomb of extremism that continues to tear the entire country apart to this day. And here is the deeply somber, tragic reality of all those decisions today. Because of decades of blatant corruption and these endless proxy wars, over 80,000 people have been killed in the recent civil war. As we speak, 20% of Yemen's entire population doesn't even have guaranteed access to 2 meals a day. Millions of families are completely homeless, and millions of young Yemenis are displaced, growing up without any real hope for a stable future. The human cost of these geopolitical games is it's immense. Which brings us to our final takeaway. Oman and Yemen started with the exact same geography, the same rich oil reserves, and the exact same crucial trade routes. Yet today, one flourishes as a beacon of peace and steady development, while the other is tragically trapped in a cycle of poverty and war. It really forces us to look at the facts and ask, can a single leader and the quality of a nation's leadership truly dictate its ultimate survival? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. What do you think about the wildly different fates of these 2 twin nations? Let us know your thoughts, and I'll see you all next time.